Welcome to Eaton Talks, a series for you and about you. It's about the experiences in our lives that strengthen us, shape us, move us, and make us grow. It's about what unites us, what inspires us, what we fear, what we love, and what makes us human. These are the stories of the people of Eaton and the moments in their lives that shaped them.
June 27th, 2022, I was at a peak in my life. I had made it. I had just hiked to the top of Machu Picchu with my lifelong friend Shannon, who I grew up next door to, and we had just made it to the top of the mountain. The sun was shining brightly and warmly. The air was cool and refreshing on my skin, and I was smiling ear to ear. It was the perfect day. Standing there at the top of the mountain, I felt strong and connected in every sense. Physically, I had just hiked 8 miles up steep, rocky terrain to make it to the top. Spiritually, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for being surrounded by such beauty, for having this incredible experience, and for crossing another item off my bucket list. Mentally, I was excited. Making it to the top of the mountain felt like a metaphor for my life. The day after returning from my trip, I was set to start a new position on the IT senior leadership team here at Eaton as the IT engagement leader. It was my dream job. I was so excited and grateful for the promotion, and I couldn't wait to get started. Everything that day was absolutely perfect. Just 2 days later, on June 29th, I had returned from my trip the night before and was still beaming from the experience. I was unpacking my suitcase and smiling at the souvenirs I was pulling out of my bag when I realized I better hurry up if I wanted to make it to the Orange Theory fitness class I had signed up for that night. I started down the stairs in my townhouse where I lived alone when I stepped wrong, and suddenly I was falling straight back and down my entire flight of stairs, each step hitting my body with a thud. When I came to a landing, I realized that my head was on the last step and the rest of my body was on the cold tile landing. A throbbing pain was radiating up and down my spine. My vision was becoming tunnel-like. I could barely breathe. Don't pass out. Don't pass out. Please don't pass out. You're okay. You're going to be okay. Don't pass out. I repeated to myself over and over again. Waves of pain kept coming. My vision was getting worse. And on top of it, I couldn't catch my breath. I knew immediately something was wrong. Is my spinal fusion okay? I wondered. I had had a spinal fusion in 1999 to correct an advanced case of scoliosis and had 18-inch rods down my spine. Could the rods have come loose? That's impossible, right? Don't pass out. Don't pass out. Please don't pass out. Maybe just being stunned by the fall knocked the wind out of me, I thought. I tried to lift up my head and move, but simply couldn't. The pain was just too much. After the next few minutes of lying there in pain, I knew I wasn't making it to Orange Theory or anywhere else that night, and I better get help as quickly as I could. Knowing that I absolutely needed to, I was finally able to muster up enough strength to push myself onto all fours. I screamed out in agony and pain as I steadied myself in my new position. I began to crawl around and thankfully saw my cell phone, which was on the second to last step. It had been clutched in my hand as I started to fall, but had been quickly lost. I was able to pick up the phone and dial. I think I'm hurt. I need help, I said into the phone. The next few minutes of making it to the hospital were an absolute blur. As I arrived at the emergency room at Ahuja Medical Center, just across the street from here at Eaton Center, I tried to put on my bravest front, but couldn't stop the tears that were rolling down my cheeks. I explained to the doctors how scared I was and what had happened and how I was so nervous that I couldn't catch my breath. I went from x-rays to CAT scans to blood pressure checks to getting an IV put in. 3 hours after my arrival, my diagnosis came back. You have several serious injuries, the doctor began. You have broken your neck. You have a compression fracture in your C7 vertebrae. A compression fracture is where your vertebrae gets compressed or squished and shifts out of alignment with the rest of your vertebrae. It is 1 millimeter away from your spinal cord. I later looked up and saw that 1 millimeter is about the same width as a credit card width, and 1 millimeter away from my spinal cord meant I was 1 millimeter away from paralyzation from my neck down. You have also broken your rib, he continued, and that rib has punctured your lung and partially deflated it. That's why you're having a hard time breathing. And lastly, you have fractured your L1 vertebrae in your lower spine, and the tip has completely broken off. We need to immobilize you immediately. And just like that, my world suddenly changed. When I think back on this moment, it still stops me in my tracks. I still get that uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. I still find myself wincing and holding my breath. It's like that with transitions, isn't it? When life suddenly shifts and you didn't see it coming. Or maybe you did see it coming, but it still feels a bit like a sucker punch when it actually happens. I was strapped to the gurney, immobile for the next 20 hours. I remember staring up at the ceiling, trying to count the tiles to pass the time. I went through an endless amount of tests and was transferred by ambulance to the trauma center in downtown Cleveland for even more tests. Is this going to be the rest of my life, I wondered? Will I ever be able to hike again? I used the time in between doctor visits to pray and to affirm I was healing. The hours seemed endless, and then suddenly good news came. The doctor let me know that my injuries were serious but stable. My neck fracture was in a delicate spot, but it would heal on its own without any surgical intervention. Instead, I would have to wear a stiff neck brace 24 hours a day for the next 10 weeks or 70 days to keep it immobile as it healed. My lung had reinflated itself overnight, and my rib and lower vertebrae that had been fractured would heal on their own, again with no surgery required. I was finally able to sit up in the hospital bed, and less than 24 hours after my fall, I was able to get out of the bed with my neck brace and walk quite stiffly out of the hospital that day. It was a complete miracle. Throughout my 70-day recovery, I had many highs and lows. The first few days were the hardest. The pain was bad, but my fear was worse. I was adjusting to the sudden change that was thrust upon my life. One of the hardest pieces for me was wearing the stiff neck brace 24 hours a day, which meant I wasn't allowed to drive throughout my entire recovery. For those of you who know me, you know I'm one of those people who is always on the go. Knowing I'd be restricted with where I could move based off of not driving was really hard for me. I had a day about 3 days after returning from the hospital where I let myself just cry and cry and cry. And at the end of that day, I told myself, okay, you've grieved, you've released your fear, now you have to make the most of this. I went to bed that night praying with teary eyes and a stuffy nose, and the next morning when I woke up, I felt such a renewed sense of strength. I knew I wasn't going to let this injury keep me down. I wanted to get back to normal life. My rationale was the more normal my circumstances, the more normal I would feel. The first thing I wanted to do was to get back to work. At the time, the only form of exercise I was allowed was walking, and I was not allowed to lift more than 5 pounds. I grabbed my work bag, took out everything but the absolute essentials, having just my laptop, a pair of shoes to change into, and some chocolate for me to eat after lunch. And for that day and for the next 70 days, I made the 1.5 mile walk from my townhouse to here at Eaton Center, starting in my new position less than 1 week after my fall, and not missing a day throughout my entire recovery. The time in my morning walks was well spent. I would listen to podcasts that were motivational to make sure that my mindset was right from the very beginning. And the funny part is, you know that Cleveland isn't really known for its stellar weather. But of all the days that I walked to work, I was only lightly rained on one day, and the rest of the days were absolutely perfect. Throughout my recovery, there were so many miracles that happened. The one that stands out to me the most still gives me goosebumps to think about. About halfway through my recovery, I woke up one morning crying hysterically and consumed with fear. In my mind, all I could think of was, what if I never heal from this? What if I pick up something wrong in the future and I become paralyzed? What if all this walking that I'm doing as part of my recovery isn't helping? Maybe it's causing more harm than good. And I had recently read an article about how healing bone broth was, and I was mad at myself that I hadn't yet incorporated it into my diet. I felt inconsolable. I decided I needed some fresh air. I wanted to go to a private park that was just down the street from my house. In the many years of going to that park, rarely did I see anyone. Maybe just a handful of people over the many years that I had gone there. I made my way to the park and to the wooded area when I started to cry even harder, really wallowing in my own self-pity. When, what are the chances, I saw someone in the distance walking towards me and waving. To be honest with you, I felt completely annoyed. I did not want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to explain why I was crying. I wanted to be alone and miserable. The lady walked up, and when she approached me, she said, "You broke your neck, didn't you?" I broke mine about 15 years ago, and I hadn't even thought about it in years until I saw you. I remember healing. I remember I was so scared I was going to re-injure myself. But don't worry. You're going to be 100% fine, and you'll probably never even think about this again. And I love that you're walking. Did you know that walking helps with blood flow and is one of the best things you can do for recovery? And while you're walking, you should stop at the grocery store and pick up some bone broth. It's incredibly healing. Oh, I'm just so glad I ran into you. You're going to be fine. You're doing great. Have a good day. Just as quickly as she came, she left. I stood there in a stunned silence. Every fear that I had in my head that I had not verbalized to anybody, she affirmed to me with love, grace, and healing. She even mentioned the bone broth. I knew that she was an angel that God had sent to me to help ease my fears. I started crying even harder at that point, but this time tears of gratitude, saying thank you, thank you, thank you, over and over again. I had walked at that park probably 100 times since that day, and I never saw her or anyone else there ever again. Throughout my recovery, I was constantly questioning myself of, what am I learning from this experience? What is this experience preparing me for? I would ask myself that over and over and journal about it, trying to put the pieces in my head together. One of my friends, seeing that I was spiraling on this question, finally stopped me and asked, "What if you aren't thinking about this the right way?" Maybe the real question is, what if everything that you have done has prepared you to survive this moment? It was an interesting question, a thought-provoking question, something I hadn't really thought of but made complete sense. There's a quote that I love: "What's down in the well comes up in the bucket. In crisis, we draw from what we've stored inside." Starting in 2020, like many of you, I slowed down. I invested in myself. I prayed, I exercised, I wrote thank you notes, I meditated, I slept, I nourished my spirit, and those habits carried me through. So I'd ask you, what is in your well? If life suddenly shifts, what would come up in your bucket? I encourage you to fill your well daily with things big and small. Take a walk, call a friend, drink more water, put your phone down a little sooner, go to bed a little bit earlier. Whatever fills you, do that, because you never know when you're going to need it. Spoiler alert, I survived. 70 days after my fall, I returned to the doctor, and my x-rays indicated that I was healed, and my mobility testing indicated that I had lost no movement. I was free and clear to resume my normal life. In fact, I had healed so well that I didn't require a transition to the soft neck brace or physical therapy like the original plan. I was completely healed. Less than a year after my fall, I was able to run a half marathon, hike a glacier in Iceland, and I still wake up every morning saying thank you, thank you, thank you, over and over again. But here's the truth. The real victory wasn't just physical recovery. It was the transformation that happened inside of me. I learned that strength isn't always just about muscle or endurance. It's about mindset. It's about faith. It's about choosing to rise even when everything in you wants to stay down. I learned that healing isn't linear. It's messy. It's emotional. It's full of doubts and fears and unexpected angels who show up in the woods and whisper exactly what you need to hear. And I learned that preparation doesn't always look like training for a race or studying for a promotion. Sometimes it's the quiet, consistent habits that we build when no one is watching. The prayers, the walks, the gratitude, the stillness, the love that we pour into ourselves and others. So I'll ask again, what is in your well? Because life will throw you curveballs. It'll knock the wind out of you. It'll send you tumbling down the stairs when you least expect it. And when that happens, what you have in your well, your faith, your resilience, your community, your self-care will be what sees you through. So fill your well, fill it with joy, with rest, with connection, with purpose, with the things that make you feel most alive, because one day you'll need to draw from it. And when you do, I hope what comes up is strength. I hope what comes up is peace. I hope what comes up is a reminder that you are more capable, more resilient, and more loved than you ever imagined.